Hi, welcome back. Today I actually want to do a video regarding my new computer, mostly a rebuild, but it's an upgrade. But I was running some of the hardware in my other case. But here I've done a fresh install of Endeavor OS since I didn't want to go through the Arch install. But what I'm running is a Ryzen 7 5800X 3D with a Radeon RX 7900 GRE. I still am using 32 gig of RAM, and it's in this Montech 011D copy of a case. It's a King 95 is what it is. I did go with their fans. They are RGB, but I am going to be actually probably switching them out for the Noctua versions because I care more about airflow and cooling than I do the look, obviously. But I do like the glass case that it has, and a lot more room for a lot larger of a video card that would not have fit in my previous Fractal case. But let's turn over to the computer and I can explain some other things on the computer. Here I have QP Graph running, and I'm actually using a head rush core. It is a guitar interface has Antares auto tune on it, which is not turned on. I only have on the signal path for the microphone. A de-esser is on there to help it some. However, as you can see, my routing interface, and I am using Wayland, as you can see, but the audio interface is functioning. And just for a second, I'm going to bring OBS over here. As you can see here, I am recording. My CPU usage is at 2% at 60 frames a second at 4K. Now I am going to go into settings. This is the beta version of OBS 30.1. But if I go into recording, I am recording in VA API in the AV1 video format. And DaVinci Resolve will decode this. So with this running, I'm going to move this back to the second monitor. I'm going to minimize this. But if I go here, it's just a standard KDE Plasma install. If I go to About This System, it is currently up to date. I am running the Zen kernel under Wayland. And there's the system here. The motherboard is an Asus motherboard. Got it with a bundle with the CPU at my local Micro Center. I did go with an ASRock RX 7900 GRE. Something I do want to show, under Wayland, if you have Color D KDE installed, that will not assign color profiles under Wayland. Under Wayland, what you have to do is you actually just need Color D installed. You go into Display and Monitor, and down here you have the ability to load ICC color profiles. You can find, obviously I have not profiled my system yet. I do have adaptive sync turned on, but I do have a feeling that is having an effect on the overall uniformity brightness of the display. But it is two 4K displays, and I am recording this at 4K. All my Wi-Fi, everything else works. I am going to be doing a review on this head rush pedal board. I did want to see if it would work on Linux, which I was fairly confident because it only requires drivers under Windows. Under Mac OS, it does not use drivers. It's just plug and play. So I figured, well, if it don't work on Linux, then I can just use it for what I actually bought it for. But you know, I got all this here, everything's going. Now, There is some weird stuff. If I launch DaVinci Resolve just by itself, it will not work. So for DaVinci Resolve, because it won't run by default, I do want to point out something really quick. What I am doing is I am using the Rusty CL driver under Arch Linux. In here, Mesa obviously works, but under OpenCL, you can use the vendor neutral version of OpenCL, which needs to be this one here, the OpenCL Rusty CL Mesa. Minimum tested driver is a 23.3.2. I'm running the 24 of Mesa. You do have to uninstall the Clover driver for this to work. I've uninstalled it, but it still will not run without this command here specifying to use Rusty CL. So I have this here, and I can hit enter. Just looking over to make sure my Resolve Studio USB key was in there. Okay, with this, it does work. This here, however, is 6K open gate video. I'm not even going to try to play this back. It plays back flawlessly under Windows, but under Linux, the 6K open gate 422 10-bit video from the Panasonic Lumix S5 II, it will play back, but it's a little stuttery. However, it does run very well, and when switching to an AMD card, you do have to go into it knowing you're losing access to the hardware GPU-based encoder. You are limited to CPU-based encoding for your final output, but it will use OpenCL during color grading, tiling, stuff like that. It's been my experience running this. When you're running NVIDIA, you have specific issues, like Wayland is kind of a hot mess. I actually tried to run Wayland when Plasma 6 came out, and I ended up going back to X11 because it got this flickering effect whenever I had full screen YouTube video or Netflix or something like that through the web browser. Other than that one little issue, NVIDIA ran totally fine under Wayland, under KDE, as far as the desktop it was concerned. NVENC encoding worked fine with the bridge interface for recording video under Wayland via OBS. But I'll just come back to the computer here real quick and we'll look at a few other things. Really, I have a lot of stuff installed. Steam obviously is installed. And Darktable is another instance of where the OpenCL is not working, from what I can tell. If I go into processing, it says OpenCL not available. AMD ROCm will work, but here's the issue right here. You have to make sure you enable the Rusty CL for the OpenCL driver here. I have not tried this yet because it looks like the Rusty CL Mesa OpenCL is still unstable. The driver is still under development for Rusty CL, so it could make stuff not run very good. But I can then close Darktable, reopen Darktable, And we can see if it enabled it. It still says unavailable, so that's requires some further looking into. I may install the ROCm driver, because that also will actually perform better with DaVinci Resolve, I believe. However, ROCm 6.0 is a little unstable with the newer kernels, but from my experience with this on my system, I do have the CPU undervolted, but I'm also limiting the CPU to only 100% power draw. I'm not allowing it to go beyond its factory spec, which with the auto settings on the motherboard, it honestly, the chip was hitting its maximum TDP, which is 90 Celsius, but limiting it to only 100% draw on its factory spec and undervolting it slightly, my temperatures dropped by 23 Celsius was the difference. It was a huge drop in temperature. But also the chip went from 4.2 gigahertz under 100% load on all 16 threads. It went from 4.2 gigahertz locked to 4.4. So undervolting it, getting the temps down, did make it run better. I'm still balancing the fan curve in the BIOS of the motherboard, but I do plan on bringing a lot more content. I'm in the process of benchmarking some games. I did run my old 2070 Super NVIDIA card with this CPU, and there was no actual max frame rate gain, but what did happen with this CPU with my older card is the 1% lows and the 0.1% lows jumped up by about 40%. So if a game was getting 15, 16 frames a second on the 1% lows, it jumped up to over 50. So where the 1% lows and 0.1% lows were more in line with the max average frame rate. However, games that were struggling to hit 60 at even 1440p resolution on the 2070 Super still struggled to hit 60. Just there was a lot less stutter. The game seemed smoother. However, with this card, I'm finding, because I mostly run my games at 1440p, and then I'll turn on FSR. I'll either force FSR on a game if it's not supported by using Proton GE, or I'll turn it on in the game if it is supported in the game. And what I found is games went from, before they were hitting 50, 60, maybe mid 60s, like Horizon Zero Dawn. Once I dropped the game down to 1440p and turned on FSR in the game on the 2070 Super, the game hit the low 70s. It ran on average at 71 frames a second, but with this card, it's hitting 140, 170 sometimes in the frame rate, so it's a more than 100% performance increase. And I do have resizable bar turned on. There is one catch though, going from an NVIDIA card to an AMD card, other than the GPU encoding in DaVinci Resolve. You have GPU encoding everywhere else. The issues you had with NVIDIA go away, but you end up with new issues. So stuff that I'm running into now is I'm having to make, like with Proton, I'm having to make a game think I'm running an NVIDIA card to get the game to launch without crashing. Games that weren't launching on the NVIDIA card, that were kind of crashy with the NVIDIA card, launched totally fine on the AMD card. However, the Mesa developers seem to be aware of some issue that is having an issue with DirectX 12 in particular. It's affecting Cyberpunk 2077 and Shadow of the Tomb Raider. From what I've found, it doesn't seem like it's fixed. You can force DirectX 11 in Shadow of the Tomb Raider and then the game runs fine, or just run the native version using the Feral translation layer. But a lot of my games went from completely not playable to playable. Cyberpunk really ain't a loss. If I want to play that, I can boot into Windows, but I do know some of the crashing issues with that game are on Windows also. So I'm beginning to notice that some of the issues I'm having with games running through Proton on Linux on the AMD card plague the AMD card also on Windows. So what it is I'm noticing I'm seeing bugs that are in Windows carrying over to running it through Proton. I am going to install GameScope because I know GameScope is easier to get running with an AMD card and probably an Intel card also regarding the Mesa drivers. I do look forward to seeing the NVK drivers. I do plan on building a small little game console Steam machine for the living room, and I may use that as a test bed with with low-end NVIDIA cards to test the NVK driver as that's being developed. Because on this channel I want to just do more general Linux content. There may be some photography stuff and video editing and other stuff, but I do believe currently, yes, a lot of Linux channels are talking about Linux and everything, but they talk about the side of Linux that your average user does not care about. You know, your average Windows user does not care about. So I want to do some tutorials and show, you know, regarding DaVinci Resolve on an AMD card. You know, it works perfectly fine. I may do a live stream editing this video just to show that using an AMD card on Linux is good. But if you're happy with your NVIDIA card, just stay using your NVIDIA card. I did this upgrade because I wanted 16 gig of RAM to be able to edit the 6K OpenGate video on this camera. But, you know, I didn't want to pay NVIDIA's prices, and honestly, I'm pretty sure with the RTX 5000 series that is about to come out from NVIDIA, I'm pretty sure their prices are gonna go up. So I really hope that Intel can get caught up with Battlemage regarding their drivers on not just Linux but also on Windows, because that will be the only thing to knock NVIDIA off of their high horse, because NVIDIA honestly is they only care about their corporate customers. They don't care about gamers. You know, and honestly, I don't think they care about Linux users either. But hopefully things will get better with NVIDIA now that there's some open source drivers working, since NVIDIA put a DRM driver inside the kernel, kind of like how AMD did with AMD GPU. But I do want to say, for everybody out there that thinks your AMD drivers are just included in the kernel, they're not. That is essentially just a driver that the Mesa drivers communicate to, or the AMD Pro drivers communicate to. Without the Mesa or AMD GPU Pro and the firmware drivers, the card will not work. When I did this install, still had to install the Mesa Vulkan driver for the AMD card to even get it to run a game. had to install a lot of stuff actually, because only OpenGL was functional, and even that was only partially functional. So don't think running AMD is just going to be, you know, you install your Linux distro and hit the ground running. That may be the case with some distributions, but I do believe some of the bigger distributions, you know, Ubuntu, you know, you still gotta, you know, you gotta add a PPA just to get the latest drivers. But let me know in the comments the stuff you'd like to see me test on this system, as I plan on doing a lot of videos. I'm actually trying to build a back catalog to start pushing out videos on a consistent basis. But like, subscribe, comment below. Let me know your thoughts on AMD, NVIDIA, and Intel as far as Linux is concerned. And I look forward to doing some more videos with this hardware. And next video may be a review of this Headrush pedal board, because it doesn't show up on the radar at all for Linux users, but it is a USB client device. It is USB standard compliant, so it does work. But let me know in the comments. Share the video, and I'll see you next time. Thank you. Bye.